Well, hey, North Park Community Church. It's Pastor Luke here with another episode of First Looks as we wrap up our series in the book of Jonah. And last week, I chose to use a different translation than our normal ESV. I chose to use Tim Mackey's literal and literary translation. Literal in the sense that it is word for word, and literal translations in the sense that where you see Yahweh show up, the covenant name of Yahweh, it's translated as that. When you see the generic Hebrew word for God, which is Elohim, we see that show up. He is literal in his consistent translation of particular words, such as gadol, which is great in Hebrew, and that's a recurring word that's used for thematic purposes. As we'll see as we approach chapter 4, we see the word for evil used in some awkward places, but it's intentionally chosen by this author for us to take note of. And so we don't want to miss some of those things. And sometimes the English translations, particularly the ESV as it comes to Jonah, does not keep that same consistent translation. And so sometimes it makes it a little bit more difficult for us to trace particular thematic elements of this whole narrative. So it's a literal translation. It's also a literary translation that he desires to preserve the flow, the meter, the tone, and the structure of the Hebrew in the way that he puts together the English rendition of this. And it's important to carry that as well, because this book of Jonah is, I believe it to be a historical account. That is something that is debated by scholars, but I believe the kind of the traditional view of it being a historic account. But what we can't do is assume that this is normal Hebrew narrative. It's not. It is very clearly literarily designed to communicate some particular messages to us as future readers. And so this is not just a historical recounting. While I believe it's historical in nature, it is unquestionably designed by the authorship here to be intentionally structured for us to draw some conclusions from it. So we looked at chapter 3 last week here, and now we come to chapter 4. And this is what we're going to be looking at today, chapter 4. I chose to keep this same document because it is a continuous flowing account. And so for us to read this properly, we have to read chapter 4 in light of the context of chapter 3 and all that had been occurring there. And where we left off with this is Jonah preaches a message of destruction to the Ninevites. The Ninevites respond. We made the case that it was not what we would call a salvation experience, in that there is no indication whatsoever, either in the text or in historical accounts, that there was a genuine entering into covenant relationship with Yahweh. We noticed how the covenant name of Yahweh ceased being used as the Ninevites were talked about. The generic term for God is used instead, and I believe that that's an indicator to us that the Ninevites took this prophecy, this omen of destruction, seriously. And because of that, there was a level of genuineness, of sorrow, or acknowledgement of the wickedness of their violent ways, in which they repented of those violent ways and ceased. And so because of that, God extends patience to them. and does not bring the foretold destruction. But we do know through history recorded in Scripture, as well as extant documentation, that Nineveh being the what would be the capital city of Assyria, would come to be destroyed by Babylon. So destruction will come to Assyria, but at this particular point, that destruction is delayed as Nineveh, for at least a moment, ceases their evil and wickedness that warranted such immediate destruction. And so with that, we want to just make note of some of the language here. It says that, looking at verse 8 right there, let them cover themselves with sackcloth, human and beast, let them call out to Elohim with force, let each man turn from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hands. Verse 9, who knows, Elohim, the Elohim, may turn and repent and turn from the heat of his anger, so that we will not perish. And the Elohim saw the doings, that they turned from their evil ways, and so the Elohim repented concerning the evil, the destruction, which he spoke to them. This word is hard for us to come to grips with, being that it very much feels kind of wrong to use the word evil, but this is a word that is often translated as evil. This is Genesis 50:20, where Joseph says to his brothers, "What you intended for evil, God used for good." It's the word ra'ah, and it means evil, distress, calamity, harm, disaster. All of that is kind of bound up in it. Now, what the Ninevites were doing was evil and wicked. And so God was going to bring about a level of destruction that was warranted given their wickedness. So this is not God repenting of doing sin or wrong, but this is what scholars sometimes call retributive justice, in which God repays evil accordingly. And so the destruction that God was going to pour forth upon Nineveh was a just and warranted response for the destruction that they were doing to God's good creation. And so I make note of that because this word ra'ah is carried forth into chapter 4. Okay, so let's look at 4:1 and then we'll pause for a moment again. And it was evil. There it is again. It was evil to Jonah, great evil, and there was heat anger to him. Okay, a couple things here. So this heat anger is similar to what we find up here, that God turned from his heat anger. The flow of what's happening here is, let's make note of it over here with a different color. This is the flow of this whole sequence of things. Nineveh does ra'ah. Okay, does ra'ah to other people. God promises ra'ah against them. Nineveh repents of its ra'ah. And so God, what a lot of our translations will do is put relents, because that sounds a little bit better in our English here. God relents of his ra'ah that he was going to pour on Nineveh. And essentially, he shows them grace and mercy. And then, looking for one, it is evil, a great evil to Jonah. Jonah judges God's mercy as Ra. Okay, and in that sense of the word, he judges it as evil. He calls God's mercy evil. So Nineveh's Ra'ah would be an evil wickedness. So Nineveh does Ra'ah in the sense of evil / wicked violence. God promises Ra'ah, in which is understood as a destruction commensurate for their evil. Nineveh repents of its evil, and they're doing violence is in there as well. And so God relents from his just destruction. That's not going to fit. God relents of his destruction on Nineveh, and Jonah judges God's mercy as evil, like God judges the Ninevites' violence as evil. This should strike us as absolutely appalling. Absolutely appalling, because notice here, it was evil to Jonah. It was a great evil. And here is the Hebrew gadol, right there, which is used throughout this book. And so in your English translations, it might say, and Jonah was exceedingly, what's it say? He distressed. Jonah was exceedingly displeased, things like that. And that's what you'll find. I think that displeased is what we have in the ESV. But again, the word is literally ra'ah, which is translated as evil. And so Gadol, that there was a great storm, there was a great fish. Nineveh is called a great city, and here it says that Jonah has a great evil that fosters within him heat anger. We think of maybe even some of the cartoons that when the cartoon would get angry, steam would start coming off their face or off their head, and they turn red and things like that. And that's the imagery here. So just maybe just because I like doing this kind of thing here, this heat anger, and if we look down just a little bit below, long of anger. I like that because we would see slow to anger is what we English translations have slow to anger, but long of anger is a little bit better, because the word anger here is this is just kind of fascinating here, is nostrils. So long nostrils. God has long nostrils is the Hebrew way of saying that he's slow to anger, because when you have long nostrils, it means it takes a long time for the smoke to come out of them. So that the heat of anger does not come out quickly. If you have short nostrils, the smoke of anger, the heat anger comes out quickly. It means you're quick-tempered. And so Jonah has the smoke coming out his nostrils, so to speak, in his anger. And so he prays to Yahweh and he says, "Please, Yahweh, was not this my word while I was upon my land? Therefore I acted before to flee to Tarshish, because I knew that you are an Elohim, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, long of anger, and great of covenant love." So this would be right here. This is your Hesed, which is steadfast, loving kindness. So a lot of translations will render it loving kindness. Okay, and who repents concerning evil. Okay, again, that's a difficult for us to see it that way because of a lot of the association connotations that we've added onto in just our English word for evil, and so we're just trying to be faithful with the original text here, and so what it looks like in the ESV is this. It's, "For I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and relenting from disaster." And so this is a direct quotation of Exodus 34. What is that, verses 6 to 8 there, and that's the occasion when Moses intercedes on behalf of Israel, and he says, "God, show me your glory," and God says, "You can't see that and live. No one can see that and live. But I will hide you in the cleft of the rock, and I will allow my goodness to pass before you, and you can have a glimpse of it from behind." And as the Lord is passing before Moses, it's declared, proclaimed that the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. And so that's what God proclaims, and that's kind of the we could maybe say it like this. I heard one scholar say that is the John. Oh, a little backwards there. The John 3:16, of the Old Testament. The John 3:16 of the Old Testament right there. And being a prophet of Israel, you better believe he knew this. He memorized it. He knew the significance of this. And he said, "God, I knew that you were like this, a God who is gracious and compassionate, long of anger, and great in covenant love." And this is why he didn't want to go in the first place to Nineveh. It was not because he was scared that they were big, bad people. This is why he ran in first place. And he says, "I know you're God. You're too quick. You're too quick to be gracious. You're too quick to give mercy, God. And they don't deserve it. They shouldn't have it. And I knew that if you had me preach, this would happen. And because God was merciful. He is hot angry. In verse 3, and now, Yahweh, please take my life from me, for good is my death more than living. And Yahweh said, is it good that there is heat anger to you? And so we'll just catch repeated words here. Is it good? This is the Hebrew word tov, which is good, translated good. And think Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. He created all the things, and each time he created something, he said it is tov. It is good. And so we have, I think also what we'll kind of see in here is almost a creational design for goodness, and that's countered by the deformation through our sin natures. I think we kind of see that theme floating around in here, and that's why I want to highlight. I mean, tov is just the word for good. It's used in a myriad of different ways, and but I think we have other things to notice here. So, is it good that this is heat anger to you? Look at that there. Heat anger. And this right here makes you think of Genesis 4, Cain and Abel. Do you do well? Do you do well to be angry, or is that's later on? Let's keep that in our minds here. Okay. And Jonah went out from the city, and he sat from the east of the city. Let's not miss that. East of the city. That sounds familiar. When people walk away from God. Adam and Eve were sent out from the east of the garden. Abraham and Lot wandered east of the land to the land to the east, which was Sodom and Gomorrah. And so this is it's a recurring thing that when people go out to the east, it's symbolic of them walking away from God. And he made for himself there a tent. He dwelt under it in the shade until he might see what would happen to the city. And so what Jonah is doing is, in short, he is waiting to see if God will kind of come to his senses. And bring justice in Jonah's sense of things. So he sits down and he's going to see what actually happens here. And Yahweh Elohim, the Lord God, appointed. Yahweh Elohim appointed. Sorry. A plant, and it arose from over Jonah to be shade upon his head and to deliver him from his evil. Okay. I should probably be making note of the times that evil shows up here. It was evil to Jonah, a great evil. God repents concerning evil, and there it is. So that it provides shade from the, and this would be in the destruction sense, the calamity. The sun was bringing destruction upon Jonah, and he rejoiced over the plant with a great rejoicing. Remember that Hebrew word, gadol, great. He had great evil. It was great evil to Jonah, right up here. It was great evil to Jonah that God showed mercy, but he has great rejoicing now that he is getting mercy. Do we see the irony? Jonah is outraged over mercy toward Nineveh. Great. Here, let me put great outraged over mercy toward Nineveh, but now has great joy in mercy of shade for himself. And we'll see the clear, undeniable hypocrisy of Jonah in this whole thing. Verse 7. And the Elohim appointed a worm. So we have appointed showing up here again. And Elohim appointed a worm at the rising of the dawn on the next day, and it struck the plant and dried it up. And it came about as the sun shone that Elohim appointed an east wind, a hot one, and the sun struck upon the head of Jonah, and he fainted, and he requested his life for death, and he said, "Better is my death more than my living." So here's an interesting note. Better is my death in Hebrew, tov. Tov is my death, and better than my living. And Elohim says to him in light of this, "Is it good? Is it good that there's heat anger to you over this plant? And is it good that there's heat anger to you?" So we have that. Here, I'm going to change this up a little bit. Is it good that there is heat anger to you over this plant? And he said, "It is good that there is heat anger unto my death." And what we have happening here is Jonah is making himself the judge of what is tov, or good. Who pronounces what is good in Genesis 1? God. But who does it here? Jonah. And we don't want to miss that. As we always said, you had pity over this plant for which you did not labor for it. You did not make it great. There it is. Gadol. Which a son of the night it was. Okay, meaning it was born in the night. And the son of the night it perished, meaning it rose up one day and it was gone the next. And he said, Should I not have pity over Nineveh, the great city? The good old city? Should I not have pity over Nineveh, the good old city, which there is in it more than 10,000 humans? 122,000? Who do not know between their right and their left, and many animals. Okay. One more thing I want to highlight here. You had pity over a plant. Should I not have pity over Nineveh? And maybe a couple comments here. God is compassionate toward their ignorance, though he will still hold their sin to account. Thus, the prophecy of destruction. Okay. So God was going, he says that they didn't know their right hand from their left back in Jonah chapter 3 when destruction was being prophesied and was going to come in the next 40 days. But they repented. They heard the message. They responded. They forsook their evil wickedness. And because of that, God extended mercy and patience toward them. And there is a level of compassion toward their ignorance in it. Because why is this city a great city? Why is Nineveh a great city? This is why. Nineveh is great because it is filled with image bearers, aka humans. This city is filled with humans made in his image and likeness. And because he is a God of love, he is a merciful and compassionate creator. The city is important to him, and their repentance is important to him. And that's what Jonah doesn't get. Jonah never gets beyond himself in his own judgments. And that makes it a really sad thing. This is actually a really sad story, because how does this end? This is the end of the book right here. There's not another page here. This is it. Should I not have pity over the great city, which is more than 122,000 humans who don't know between their right hand and their left, and many animals? ? And the question's out there. And there's nothing else. Jonah doesn't have a response that we have recorded here. And it's almost as if It's almost as if the question is left as an unanswered ending because it's a question for us. We read the story and we see Jonah. It's easy to throw stones at Jonah. But when we read the story, honestly, the cliffhanger of the question there leaves a probing element in our own minds and hearts of the ways in which Jonah is a mirror to us. And we're left with the same question, and we're left to answer it. Should God not have pity over X, Y, Z? And if this is the kind of God that he is, that he has been to us, then are we not to mirror God and his compassion rather than mirroring Jonah and his arrogant, proud judgmentalism toward these people? And I think that'll preach. I think that'll preach this Sunday. This is a remarkable book. This is an absolutely remarkable book. And in all that I have said through 4 messages, it will be 4 messages this upcoming Sunday, and 4 of these first looks, there is still so much more that could be said. And so I hope that this has helped foster an awe and amazement at this beautiful letter, this beautiful book, and a desire maybe even to plunge into it afresh again in the future, saying, I got to see this again and I got to receive this again. And so I hope this has been helpful. I'd ask that you pray for me, church, as I go ahead and craft this message into what will be the sermon that I preach on Sunday. I'm excited for it, and I love you, church, and I look forward to it.